Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Malone solo role playing YouTube channel. I am your audacious host, Malone, and today we are going to talk about circles. Like that's a circle, that's a circle, that's a circle, and not just any old circle, magic circles. I want to start with a story. Around 1300, um, Pope Boniface VIII wants to do a little painting project. A little place called St. Peter's Basilica. You ever heard of it? Yeah. Well, he wanted to get that painted up. So he decides to commission the painting of it. So he has these courtiers go out into what is present day Italy, Rome, surrounding areas to get a sense of who would be the best person for this. And so they kind of track down the who's who. And one of them goes to see Giotto and go into his workshop. And they say, "Hey, we're having you're on the Pope's short list, and what we'd like to do is gather something from you that will show what you do, like something that demonstrates your talent." And Giotto, who is apparently a very, really, really nice dude, good natured guy, was like, "Are you asking like to take one of my paintings?" And they're like, "No, no. In fact, that would be kind of difficult because I have to see like quite a few. So, other people have given me just like a sketch from your notebook or whatever. Would you be willing to do that?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, absolutely." But again, what am I supposed to be showing? And the courtier's like, "We want to see your genius. Pope Boniface really needs somebody who is a special, unique talent that can do things that nobody else can do." And Giotto is like, "Oh, I see. Okay, I have just the thing." And he opens up his notebook and takes a paintbrush, dips it into some red paint, and proceeds to paint a perfect circle freehand. And he rips it out and he goes, "Here you go, give him that." And this courtier was like feeling mocked and was like, "Okay, haha, can I have another drawing?" And Giotto was like, "Nope, that should be more than enough." Um, and the courtier was like, "Okay, dude." And he gives the stack of paintings to Pope Boniface, and he's like, "How was this created?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, this guy did it. Like he just did this." He's like, "In front of you." He's like, "Yeah, he just painted it. I don't know. He just dipped the." He was like, "I want this one. To be able to do this, you need to possess extraordinary mastery." And so he was awarded the commission. And it's sort of like a little fun trivia thing here. Um, there are different ways a lot of people can show their genius, but I actually have a little something in common with Giotto. That's right. Um, I will show you exactly what I'm talking about like this. Yeah. Oh, shoot. I dribbled paint. Hold on a second. I need. Oh, damn it. For reasons you probably have not uh, talked about or even thought about since you were 5, um, a circle is difficult to draw for many reasons. Number one, there are no guide points. Like, oh, damn. There are no, you cannot use the edges of the paper as
means to compare your lines. There are no corner points that you can use as points of emergence or destination. Usually, you only realize later, you think you're drawing a circle, and then you take your hand away and go, oh, I was actually drawing an egg, right? So there is a definitely a skill to it, a craft. But at the same time, a circle is more than a circle. It is powerful. Um, and I'm not saying that Giotto was like, oh, well, I'll make a circle because that will demonstrate to the Pope not only that I have all of this talent, but also he will be moved by the appearance of a circle because its shape denotes wholeness and protection and centrality, such as the centrality of Catholic social, like whatever it was. He was like, this is a good shorthand for what I can do. And in the same way, the Pope did not receive this and go, oh, wow, look at this circle. Why don't we bring him here and then he can put circles all over St. Peter's and make it a polka dot chapel. No, he um, not consciously or didn't spell this thought out this way, but the idea that he inferred was like, wow, he can draw that circle freehand. Okay, let's bring him here to make many circles and combine them with squares and triangles and lines and points to make beautiful paintings, which, by the way, just a bit of trivia, the basilica that St. Peter's Basilica at that time is now referred to as Old St. Peter's because I think there was like a fire, it got destroyed, it got moved in part to Assisi, and the St. Peter's Basilica that's in Vatican City now is considered a different structure. So St. Peter's Basilica, and then that one is the Old St. Peter's Basilica. Just the more you know. Anyways, um, I'm not uh, suggesting that there was any purpose other than to show his skill. But I am saying that throughout history, throughout cultures, obviously a circle is meaningful and it represents symbolically many important things. I have one great example right here behind me. This guy, Arthur Pendragon, right? The Knights of the Round Table. The round table signifies equality. Nobody sits at the head of that table. Everyone has equal participation. Storytelling circles, arena or coliseums, wedding bands, wedding rings, the mandala, right? The Hindu, Buddhist, indigenous traditions all had this form of mandala, circular maps of the cosmos that would to induce a sort of meditative state, and uh, they serve as ritual diagrams. The halo, like why is there a halo? Like you ever think of that? Why angels have a halo and not a bucket, right? Um, it's radiant energy. It's perfection. It's because it is divine completeness. And so, yes, like in many of these examples, there is a pragmatism to it. Like the round table was to express a political notion, or an aspirational political state, or to convey a relationship with these high lords, to centralize power. The wedding ring, the fact that that's a circle is pragmatic. Like you're not going to have a wedding triangle. They're like, oh, thanks. Ow, 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 ow. Well, it wouldn't be on this finger, but the there is a pragmatism to it, but there's a symbology. The wedding ring is endless. It is a closed loop. There is the sanctity of it. There is no interruption. It is closed between the the ends are closed. They're not like this circle that I made right here, right? That it is a symbol of binding, of eternity, of commitment, continuous, unbroken. So the circle then is in many ways not much of a stretch to understand why the circle is used in shamanism, Wicca. It's used in many different religious traditions to embody something that separates what is outside from what is inside. The circle is a threshold that contains something powerful. The world inside of a circle is different from what is outside of it. It's no surprise then that shapes, the nature of shapes, what shapes show up at different periods of history and different cultures, the shapes attributed to different organizations, maybe the shapes on a dollar bill. These things are the concern and interest, yes, of like your cousin Bogey who works at TJ Maxx. They're also part of serious, legitimate academic inquiry. They're also um, part of serious but speculative fields. So they might be like borderline but not fringe. They are interpretive or speculative anthropological theories. So they're not pseudoscience. They're just highly theoretical, right? Like Levi Strauss discussed basic shapes as these fundamental structures of thought, right? Just like the binary computer code. And yes, so some of it, a person might be willing to discuss it from an artistic standpoint of like what the shape might represent, but maybe they don't go that far into sacred geometry. I mean, that's fine, but like I said, there are serious, well structured disciplines, art history and architecture. These fields legitimately track shifts in geometry, symmetry, spatial preference across cultures and eras. Um, Classical architecture is going to be geometric proportions, squares, rectangles. You know, like Byzantine Islamic architecture and art uses circles, domes, intricate radial geometry. And then Gothic architecture is when pointed arches, triangular logic, a trinity sort of logic um, starts to appear, especially in churches, cathedrals. And then modernist architecture is a lot of right angles and grids. And postmodern architecture, you see a lot of bullshit. So they postmodern architecture reintroduces curves and has a chaotic geometry that seeks to like defy your expectations and sometimes even the expectations of sound structural design vis-a-vis like physics. But these differences are empirical, historical, documented. There's no mystical claims in them. Anthropology, symbolic studies. These anthropologists look at cosmograms, symbols, sacred geometry, and throughout cultural history, the mandala, Tibetan, Indian circular cosmology, the bagua, the octagonal cosmology. It's Chinese. Ancient China had the square earth, round heaven model. Um, Indigenous North American peoples had the medicine wheel and circular ritual spaces. Yeah, again, the auras and just medieval Christian diagrams. Um, there's These are legitimate analyses of cultural symbolism. Okay, and so you take those ideas from the soft sciences And you see that there is hard sciences that actually look at how humans perceive shapes. Like circles feel safe, natural, organic. Squares feel stable, architectural, hardworking. Um, Triangles are dynamic and directional and sometimes threatening. And so these preferences then, they're not just like these theoretical notions that people go, oh yeah, yeah. These like influence design, architecture, what is it? My cousin Brian works at UX, and of course like ritual behavior. Uh, and then you have um, philosophies. The phenomenology philosophy of like space is something that takes this seriously to examine uh, how this penetrates like across. You have like culture, you have the science, you have the anthropology, and like what kind of relationship do we as humans have with this? What kind of feedback loop, and what is affecting what? Are we the ones that are responsible for like humans, I'm saying, shifting architecture, or is it that these shapes show up and then it affects us? If you really want to read a very interesting architectural book, check out The Eyes of the Skin, which the author, I'm not going, okay, I'll say what I think it is, and then we'll see what it is. I think it's Johan Paliasa. That's what my memory is saying, and let's see how much I've humiliated myself. Okay, I was expecting a bigger humorous payoff. That wasn't that terrible. It's Juhani Palasma. But check out this book if you can find it. I looked it up on Amazon and it's $70 on there, but I bet you could find it somewhere else. So it's called The Eyes of the Skin. It's fascinating. It's basically he's this Finnish dude, and he's like his central thesis is that we have in this modern era completely excluded four of the five main senses from our consideration in architectural design. We only talk about what it looks like, not what kind of spaces it creates, the smells, the feels of things. Like those aren't considered part of the architectural study, and as far as architecture even exists at this state. But um, it, basically, the result of this is that we have architecture that is best beheld from a distance, and it maintains distance from us. Um, I had a job. This was, gosh, like almost 10 years ago now. And it was one of these jobs where I was like, what? How you're paying me that much? And I moved to a new place, and they paid for me to move. And I was like, it was amazing. And the job was the most miserable job of my life. And uh, part of what was so miserable is I thought I was Mr. Big Shot, and I'd always lived in these like sort of old buildings. And I liked old buildings, but I was always jealous of like, I don't know, Disney kid apartments or something. And so I got this loft apartment where it was. And it was designed to look like it was from like an old building, but it was so vacant. And I remember sitting in the middle of this room, totally distant from any piece of this, of the walls, of the wind. Like it was like there was a box that was just placed over my head. I was in an upside down shoebox. And I remember thinking, no ghost would ever haunt this place. This place it's barely a place. It's like a container. And I was just like, I promised myself that for the rest of my life, I would only live in places with ghosts. Hey, Marie. Sorry, Marie's haunting me. 1 second. Marie, BB doesn't want you to haunt me when she's not around. Well, I know. It just doesn't, it's not, that's not okay. All right, so let's shift now from Juhani to Johan. So in early 20th century, you got this guy, Johan Huizinga. I know that's not the proper way to say this. There is a Dutch way to say this, like I keep doing guttural. Huizinga. Nah. Anyways, Johan is a well, he's a polymath. He does a whole bunch of stuff, but he is widely known. You should know this name because he's considered like the first cultural theorist. This was just not a subject that was seen in this way up until that point. And Huizinga started his career as an Indologist. He studied the like language culture of the Indian subcontinent, and he has this interface there with mandalas, and he becomes fixated on symbols, symbology. And his work begins to drift back toward Europe in this sort of mental model. And he starts to look at a time that is considered filled with all manner of symbols, ritual, uh, social protocol, ceremonies. It just had a ton of them, and that was the Middle Ages. And basically, um, he looks at the Middle Ages, and in some ways, he accentuates what is already the even to today the prevalent understanding of the Middle Ages, which is like it's a terrible time in which there's lots of plagues and untreatable axe wounds and monks who are like almost done with copying half of their first Bible at age, the ripe old age of like 58. And then they die the next year. And it's just, damp. There's moats. People are just slipping on mud everywhere. But at the same time, he's like, you also have all of these different symbols and rituals. What is going on here? Like, what is the meaning of all this? I was just looking at the escutcheons in the back of the Pendragon core book. So, like, the process of replicating this, even in this book, is insane. And so, thinking about the actual steps of determining, oh, do we have like a chevron or a fess or a bendy or Freddy, and there's this like certain way to talk about them. Yeah, all these charges, the lion, the bear, the escallop. Um, Sir Lycus, the bachelor knight, has green shield with silver chief with a black wolf on the chief, and you would say that vert green on a chief argent a sable wolf, or a purpur, a bend between two mullets of 8 argent. Um, so he is he says his medieval life was saturated with ceremonial performance. Okay, and that the society there, probably a certain stratum of society, was living inside this constant cycle of public display, processions, parades, mock battles, pageants, festivals, saints' days, coronations, seasonal rituals and rites, uh, theatrical moral allegories. These events weren't rare, they were every day. This was built into it. And most towns had like fest calendars so dense that a large part of the year was like just structured by whatever that group of rituals was. Okay. And so um, he looks at all of this and he's like, well, what does this kind of like remind me of? What does this look like? And he says, well, these knights, nobles, courtiers, they lived through this ritualized behavior, stylized speech, coded gestures, and these socially performed identities that, such as like courtly love
was a ritual game. So much so that we now have like a game in Pendragon where there is actual like feast cards that you get different points for saying a joke that doesn't land or something like that. Knightly combat was a ceremonial contest. It had rules, and you could actually depend on your competitor to like follow them. It wasn't the thing of like this dude's gonna bite me like that, like unless you were fighting somebody who was not under that code. Um, Tournaments were structured games, and honestly, these chivalric orders, they were um, these kind of social uh, uh, societies that their purpose was to just affirm your role and to make you do stuff that was like, this is my role, this is who I am. Hello, everybody. This is what I am. Here's what I do. Their lives, he said, were almost like scripts, like they were scripted. And because of this, because the fact that public justice and even punishment were theatrical, he was like, this culture at the time, and he wrote a book called the Autumn of the Middle Ages. That was where he like made his name around 1919. He wrote this. He basically says in that that it was all this crap that collapsed the Middle Ages, um, because it was filled with play in the way that he describes play, and we'll talk about that shortly. But he said you have all this stuff going on, but it's hollow, totally meaningless. Where was it coming from? Why were they doing it? Well, a lot, like towards the end, a lot of them didn't even know. Here's a good one right here. This is one of the feast cards. So you witness a knight insulting a lady and rise up in her defense. So you would test your honor, and on a success, the knight apologizes. You get +1 geniality. Um, a critical success, he apologizes profusely and backs down to you. If you fail, the knight feels he is in the right and accepts your challenge. He challenges you to a duel. And if you fumble, the knight laughs in your face and you get -3 geniality. Um, so Huizinga does not disagree with the sort of predominant understanding that it was terrible. There was all these terrible things going on. And especially as you have this burgeoning of Catholic rites in the liturgical calendar, he sees this, and the reason they clung on to all of this is because that was their only defense. That was their only defense. The exaggerated formality and romanticism in this late medieval courtly society, right? We're talking about court society, like the peasants and stuff like that, the serfs that probably didn't understand any of this, probably like made fun of it. It was a defense mechanism because there was so much bloodshed and everything was like brutal. It was just brutal. There was no medicines. There was just terrible possibilities for like food, and it was just awful. And so they clung on to this almost as like a dome of custom, a biodome, if you will. Great movie. And so he concludes because of this that there was modernization needed to happen, but it couldn't happen. Like in order to compete with outside pressures and the fact that like science was still eked out a living, it kept happening in some ways, and changes in how governance was happening and statehood and stuff like this. The medieval Europe was stuck in like above the salt or below the salt arguments, and again, you have this growing corpus of Catholic rites added into this already overstuffed calendar, and basically this just imploded medieval society.
And this, of course, then like gave way to the Renaissance, right? As a individualism, humanism, scientific progress. It just wasn't able to hold, and the reason is because it was hollow. It was vacant. It was the form of it, but not the actual thing. But here's the rub. His final actual conclusion was that this was a very playful society. That's how he phrased the conclusion. And he felt it was deeply play structured while being deeply pessimistic and exhausted. There's not a contradiction there. The playfulness that he describes, it's not cheerfulness, it's formalism, ritual, symbolic overgrowth. Okay, so it's in his vocabulary, this met many of the definitions of play. However, it was missing something important. Okay, and so to figure out what that is, let's break it down a little bit and say what exactly did Huizinga think that play was? Well, he actually established some like a phenomenology of it, and it has 7 requirements. And if you've been half sleeping while I was just talking about all that, this is where it will get more concrete and relevant to our world. Here's a story. When I was in college, it was summer, and it was between my sophomore and junior year, and we decided to stay on campus because our lease extended out. They gave us the option to extend it for the summer. So we lived on campus, had we were going to party all summer, have a great time. And my friend and I got an invitation to a party from somebody who we were like friends with, but we were maybe like second tier friends. So we were kind of surprised. But she said to me and my friend Kyle, like, hey, I know you're on campus. I'm having this party at my parents' house. It's not far from there. Since you guys are there, do you want to come out? And it's pretty far, but you can stay over. And we were like, yeah. And so we showed up and grabbed our cases of what would have been then PBR or, oh Lord, Strohs or, and we go to the door and this dude opens it, who honestly probably was my age now, but looked like he was, even in my mind's eye right now, he's 40 years older than me. But he's like, "Oh, shoot, guys, yeah, we're not gonna do the whole alcohol thing. That leads to bad decisions. But don't worry, we're gonna have a lot of fun here. It's our dad." And we're like, "Oh no!" And there was a point, seriously, when we were bringing the beer back to the car, that we were just like, dude, let's just go. Let's just leave. We decided to go in, and we walk into the living room, and everyone is like playing a game. And we were like, no. And just to kind of cut to the quick here, it ended up being an awesome, fun party because it was, as you might guess, we didn't just get sloppy drunk and talk a bunch of nonsense that we didn't remember. We actually had great food and great conversation, and we played this game. So this was the first time that I'd ever played a game that many of you probably know, if not by another name. But the what it was called here was Mafia. And in Mafia, you have one person who's sort of the conductor, and most people are townspeople. You're playing this town where a series of murders are happening, and 2 of the people, everyone like closes their eyes, and then whoever's conducting it, 2 people are randomly selected. It might be from like a playing card. You pass out playing cards. You'll say, okay, whoever has the ace of spades and the ace of clubs, you are Mafia. And you don't show it to anybody. It's only you that knows. And then it says, whoever has the whatever, king of diamonds, you are the investigator, and whoever has the queen of hearts, you are the nurse or the doctor, where and then everybody who had something else, you're just a townsperson. And the way that the game went was everyone goes to sleep, closes their eyes, and then whoever's conducting it will say, okay, whoever is Mafia, open your eyes. And those people try very hard not to move. You don't want to make any sounds. And then they'll say, okay, Mafia, who do you want to put a hit on? And using just eye contact, people will kind of like very small movements, like point to somebody. And then, okay, go to sleep. And then investigator, who do you want to investigate? And they'll pick somebody that maybe they felt like they heard movement or something. They'll point to that person. And then it's like, nurse, who do you want to save? And that person will open their eyes after the investigator closes theirs. And they'll say, that person over across the room or whatever. You open your eyes, and if they're good, the person leading it will be like, well, it was a storm last night. It was a terrible storm, and it must have really got Randy, because Randy, we think he got struck by lightning 18 times in the back or whatever. Now, the Mafia chose Randy. The investigator gets to ask if somebody is Mafia, yes or no, and the conductor will tell them. And then the nurse gets to select somebody, and if they select the same person that a hit was put on, that person gets like saved, like they don't get killed. And you keep doing this, and in between each night, when everyone closes their eyes, townspeople talk to each other and figure out who it was, who they think it was, and then they accuse somebody. And that person gets a chance to defend themselves, and then they vote. And if everyone votes that they think that person's the Mafia, in this household, they were put in jail, which usually, if you play otherwise, that person, I guess, is just put to death, like a Shirley Jackson, the lottery. And the objective is to root out and identify and jail the Mafia before they get everybody. And this was, like I said, the first time I played it, and it was so fun because I was great at it. I was great at it because I was a big old liar when I was a little kid, and I got caught during a parent-teacher conference. My teacher was like, so Malone, to my mother, so Malone tells us that his uncle drives the car from Back to the Future. And my mother, who has never said a swear word in her life, she's like the most benevolent, virtuous person possible. She was like, yes, he has a DeLorean. And the teacher's like, oh, really? It's like, yeah, he has a DeLorean. It's like, wow, don't see that very often. It's like, yeah, it's a rare car. And then it's like, well, he also says that his uncle also owns Disney World. And my mother said, yes, you can understand. It's a child. He has an imagination. He is like on one of the executive boards. I'd never been to Disney World. In fact, at that point, I'd never been on a plane. I went on a vacation to like a Six Flags theme park that was nearby. And so I was like, dude, my mom is totally covering for me. This is awesome. And so I was so psyched because my teacher, she was a jerk anyways, but my mother was like, yeah, okay. Anything else about my child? And she's like, I guess not. She's like, great. So we get outside. I'm feeling awesome. And in the car, my mom was like, she grabbed my face and she looked at me and she said, that's it. I took on that for you. And so you don't lie anymore. So I had a strict no lie policy because I don't know what my mother did when she took my hand in her face, but she used some sort of parenting jujitsu move that because she didn't punish me, it was like my whole life had to be my punishment or me making up for it. And so I just had it like in this thing automatically of like, no, I can't lie anymore. I can't tell these stories. I can't tell fibs. But now I was unleashed, this long forgotten talent. And here's the important part. I didn't feel bad about it. Why? Because It's play. I knew, for instance, when I was a kid, we'd play like soldiers, army, or we play cops and robbers or whatever. And yeah, like sometimes you'd kill somebody on the other side or whatever, but it wasn't real. It was play. So you can do bad things because you're just playing. And so I was like, not only is this allowed, it's part of the game. And so I was just running the table. Now, if any of you play Mafia, you know that if you have a smoking ace, such as myself, the people, they eventually start turning against you. And what they do is they will start to vote you dead like first round because they just don't want you in the game as like an X factor to mess things up. So this is what was happening to me about the third game of this. People were on to me and it looked like I was going to get taken down pretty quick. And luckily, my boy Kyle covered for me, got the vote, rounded up the votes I needed to stay alive. Shouts out Kyle. And nevertheless, there was this. It was like round 4 where I was like, I'm going down. I need to throw a Hail Mary here. And so I looked around the room, and my friend Rob had this. His girlfriend was Liza, and Liza was very shy. And like a shark to the blood, I was like, yeah, I think I got to take down Liza here to give me some cover. And so they accused me, and it was my time to defend myself. And side note, defending yourself in Mafia is the funniest, stupidest, most pointless thing. And everybody will defend their character as if like they chose to be the Mafia, and they'll be like, I would never do that. I deal with my problems face to face. Andy was killed. Andy's my boy. I would never take out Andy. And so it's like, dude, this doesn't defend you. Like the actual things you're being judged on is I heard someone move a little bit. I heard somebody like breathing differently when they were choosing who to kill. And so I was like, I really got to go for it. And so I was like, okay, well, I didn't want to say this because it's advantageous for me to stay under, but I think those sitting near me probably already know this. Like, I'm not Mafia because I am the investigator. The investigator was somebody else, but they were taken out early in the game. And when you're taken out, you can't talk. And so I didn't know that at the time, hence it was a Hail Mary. And I said, so you can do that, but I want you to know that somebody's been hiding this whole game. And just for the hell of it, I asked, and wouldn't you know it, Liza is Mafia. And she looked and was like, what? And she hadn't made a sound the whole day. And I was like, oh yeah, you're going to act surprised now? I was like, Liza here, taking people out. I said, it's 100% Liza. And even Rob was in on it. Like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. And everybody is like, no way, Liza. Like, Liza, how could you do? And everyone's having a good time. But I like look at her, and suddenly I see in her face something real. And she is furious. And she says, I didn't do anything. And I still was kind of like hanging on to the kayfabe, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's what I would say too. They voted. They eliminated her. She stood up, and in a voice that I don't think I'd ever heard her use before then and since then, and said, at this very nice Christian house, she said, fudge you. Only she didn't say fudge. She said, fudge you, Malone. Fudge you. And then stormed out of the room. And everyone was shocked silent. And you know what? She never spoke to me again. And I am still a bit bothered by that because I was playing the game. That's how you play the game. Now, I get it. In the midst of the game, you can get mad at people. I bit my brother on the head when we were playing Street Fighter 2, and he kept sweep kicking me with Colonel Guile, and I had Blanca, and since I couldn't use Blanca's bite move in the game, I jumped and I bit his head. That was last week. No, I'm kidding. I was like 6. And so I get that, but to carry that beyond the game, to say that I actually accused her falsely of a crime, to hold that against me, I was appalled. I was like, are you kidding me? That's how you play. And I never was able to formulate both why I felt the way I did about it, why she might have felt the way she did, why any of that happened, why I was still mad about it, until I read the book by Johan Huizinga. And this book, where's my pen? Or shall I say books? Kidding. Sorry, I had to. Is Homo Ludens by Johan Huizinga. All right. And you see it's the study of the play element in culture. And that's important because in this book, Huizinga makes a bold claim. Just so that it's clear, the meaning of Ludens, like we are Homo sapiens, and sapiens comes from sapere, which is to know, or to think, and rational man. And so Homo Ludens, Ludens is from the root ludere, which is to play, right? Like the Romans had big competition games, ludi. Where's something more? Oh, interlude. Interlude literally means between play. So, like, if you're at a play, there's an interlude, right? Allude, allon. Allude is play toward. So, like BB says, like, what are you playing at? What are you getting at? Allude. And talks about how we are humans, or we are rational beings who think, but we are also beings who play. And because the reason that is important, and this is his bold claim, is that play is not a frivolous behavior. It is a central human activity that generates culture. It is not downstream from culture. Culture is downstream from play. Okay, which was a big claim. He had to back that up. And so the first thing to back that up was to establish, well, what are you actually talking about when you say play? And for this, we have his book is basically the phenomenology, the establishment of that, and has 7 main qualifiers. In the first one is where we see what went wrong, in the very first one. And that is that play must be voluntary. A person must enter into play voluntarily. They must agree to be part of it. And if a person is not able to voluntarily be part of it, including taking on the randomness of all the things that can happen, right? Because, there's rules and there's structure, but anything can happen. Somebody playing any sport can get injured, right? And so it has to be voluntary. And by everybody voluntarily entering into it, you have a shared understanding of the world. And I suppose at this point, I should just name the big main stickiest of ideas that came out of this for him, which is the one by sticky. I mean, it still is the sort of hallmark understanding of play that survives to today, is what he called the magic circle. Okay. And so when I said that earlier, that this circle is important, that it is a threshold of what is interior and exterior. To be in the circle denotes that you have passed a threshold. Play, you must voluntarily enter the magic circle. All right. Number 2, inside the circle must be activities that are outside ordinary life. And we actually see in the first thought that might come to mind is like, well, yeah, like, but little kids, they play like house. That's part of life. Or now there's even virtual reality where you can play at being at work. Yes. I'll just give you, if that's what you thought of, I'll give you a second to think about that. So with the kids, they see that, but they're not able to do that. They can't, a 4-year-old can't actually make a casserole, right? They can't actually drive a car. They're not able to do that. So that's the same as me, saying, oh, well, I if I played, acted that I was a knight, that's ordinary because I can go get a sword and some armor and walk around, Greenwich Village with and probably somebody is walking around Greenwich Village right now in a full suit of armor, but it's outside of your ordinary life and the other voluntary participants. As far as the office job, I think that in and of itself, the fact that that is no longer ordinary has many sociological and economic considerations to be made that are not part of this video. Number 3, it has to be bounded. And by that, it means it's bounded by both time, right? Like, say this, like sports, the match begins. This is how much time you have. In speed chess, right? Like hammering the clock. But it's not only time, it's also not as much place, but space. All right. So this area is the play area. This is out of bounds. This is way out of bounds, right? This is the goal. This is anything that's even a millimeter outside of this is not a goal. Okay. It's rule governed, obviously, but this is important. The game has to have structure and it has to have limits, and those do not unfortunately provide tension or conflict. They intentionally and meaningfully provide tension and conflict because most of what play, like most objectives in playing, if you were not in the game, the objectives that you seek during a game of, say, basketball are extremely easy outside of the game. If I were to ask you right now to take a 3-pound bag of air and put it up on a shelf, and you either can jump or use a step stool, that's not hard. But in basketball, it is. Why? Well, there's no step stool because the shelf is 10 feet in the air. Because there's another team who's trying to keep you away from the shelf so that you can't put this 3-pound bag of air into the bucket. American football, it's literally like outside of the game, outside of the circle. It's like, take this weirdly shaped purse and step over that line. That's really easy, but and very good games should be easy. In fact, as we look, I'm not going to go too into it, but 2 of the individuals, whose names are Salen and Zimmerman, found some from 2004 where they actually created systems theories for a lot of Huizinga stuff to make it applicable to game design. But most game designs have that thing that is at the core of them. It should be a simple thing that is like relevant to and recognizable by the audience, because as it gets more complicated, the game becomes more of like a niche audience thing. This is probably the least niche of niche things, but I just think of Magic the Gathering. Uh, we could probably break that game down into everyday activities. Uh, but there are so many different. I mean, the game is about like changing rules as you go. And I just think about my father. You could probably sit him down in front of a game of Magic the Gathering, like not asking questions, just sitting there for a year and be like, at the end of the year, Dad, go up to him and say, okay, how do you play Magic the Gathering? And he would look at me. He is a smart man. He's very sharp. And he'd be like, Malone, I have no idea. Because it's just not easily transferable to see like what is happening. Um, that's why like sports have such broad appeal, because it's behaviors that everybody is doing, and the less recognizable those behaviors are, the more narrow people's viewership is, right? I mean, that's and the more that a group of people or a person is involved in those things, the more excited they get. You just think about like audiences for NASCAR. There's not a lot of NASCAR fans in New York City, perhaps because not a lot of people there drive in the middle of that city. It's probably a generalization, but I don't know. I'd bet $60 billion that it's correct. So it has to be rule governed, and these rules are part of the voluntary buy-in. Number 5, it has to be intrinsic, or it has to have intrinsic value. It is people who are voluntarily in the Magic Circle are there for the game in and of itself. Okay, because if you are having people come into it non-voluntarily, they can participate in what looks like a game. The Hunger Games, Running Man, I heard the remake is awful, but it's not. They're not actually playing. It's almost you're play acting play. It's not a game. It's not play, and you're not in the magic circle, because remember, this magic circle, yes, it is play, but so was all this crap in the Middle Ages, and but that was play. It was playful in how it appeared, but there were parts of this that were missing that made it hollow. All right, and number 6, this one certainly wasn't missing, for better or worse, and mostly worse, but participation in play is absorbing while you are in it. The consideration of the wider world narrows. Obviously, there are some things that like intrude on that. I often think philosophically about people that like parachute into sporting events or run onto the field or get in the way of like Tour de France, like causing these crashes and stuff. And it's so upsetting when somebody gets, it's somewhat funny sometimes, but like when somebody hurts the athletes or something like that, it's no different than hurting anybody, but there's something about it that feels especially violative, where it's like you went into their circle and you weren't allowed in their circle, right? But there is, I think, again, we could probably pull that apart, but while you're in it, that is what you're focused on. The goals of your team or of your individual performance, they are the central focus of you. If you're playing golf, you're not like, you might have it as a secondary gain, but if you're playing and you're invested in it, you're not like, I am going to swing my club this way because then this part of my arm will be face down and I need to get more sun on this side of my arm or whatever. Like that is a consideration that is not going to be in, like, play is your whole world. When you're in it, it's your whole world. And finally, um, this world that you're in is a world of different meanings. And basically, what this means is that there are things within the game that, within the play sphere, within the circle, actions mean different things. Symbolism is different. Taking a knee, if you're a quarterback, uh, going like this, right, for a timeout. All of these things are symbols that take on new meaning. And in fact, it's not even just the things that are legitimately like activate a mechanic of the game. If you take away the game, the person either looks like they're doing something very normal, perhaps with too much vim and vigor, or that they are positioning themselves in a sort of bizarre, meaningless, stereotypic manner. Like, if you take away the chessboard and the chess, and you just have someone sitting there going like, right, or it's just non-notable. It's like, if I were to recreate one of the best runs by Walter Payton, but there are no people trying to tackle me, and I'm not on a field in a crowd during a game, and I'm not wearing football pads, I'm just like running my ass off, just like, and people are like, what is going on, right? Because if you remove that, those meanings go away. And suddenly, instead of like getting an 84-yard carry, I'm getting questioned by the police if I've used any, like amphetamine. And so these are the phenomenology, like the criteria. But then we have another one with a fun name here. We have first name that I'm not remembering right now, but Caillois. Caillois. Yeah, Caillois. And of course, every good Caillois needs a first name of, one moment. That's right, it's Roger. Roger Dodger. So Caillois has a book called Man, Play, and Games. And here we can use this, if we're using this as a model in the way that I did when I was thinking about that scenario with Liza. We see that Liza was not, first of all, she was not voluntarily in the game as in the same way that I was. She was not as invested. She probably didn't want to be there. I think they ended up breaking up shortly after that. She was not very engaged with anybody, but everybody was doing it. And so she was in the game, yes, but she was not fully voluntary. Like, given her druthers, she would not have chosen to be there. All right. And so she probably did not invest herself enough to pull herself out of ordinary life. But nevertheless, because she, on the surface, seemed voluntary enough, she was governed by those rules, bounded by those things, had no intrinsic meaning of it, was not absorbed. And at the number 7 here is probably also where things got mixed up, because in the real world, lying is not good, and it is not fair, and it's exploitative because it makes people decide things given incomplete or incorrect information, and disrespects people's ability and their decision making, etc. And so for her, I was violating a thing that had a different meaning to her. Okay. Now, when we look at Caillois, we can see even more, like on the more micro level, what was probably going on with her. Because beyond this phenomenology, Caillois gives us a taxonomy. He breaks out play to say, like, well, what are the different types of play? And this, I think, is the most intriguing. I also feel compelled to say with Ludens, while I was looking at this, I was just reminded that of the word Luddite, and Luddite and Ludens are not etymologically related. And the story of Luddite has nothing to do with any of this, but it's pretty funny. So I'll just tell you right away. It actually comes from England, like during they had these like period of strikes where factory workers were leaving constantly during this period of industrialization, and they would like force them back, or they would need money and they would go back in, or they would have these contracts that were like the only way you could stop work is if the machine is broken. And so these machines mysteriously started breaking, and the employees would be like, well, we have to leave, but you still have to pay us because it's a broken machine. Like, what the hell are we supposed to do? We came to work and everything. And they would say, well, who broke it? And they would say, well, I I think it was that new guy, Ned Ludd. And then when they would get like time off for the broken machine, they would go to the pub and they would all cheers to another day off. Compliments of King Ludd. Here's to King Ludd. And so Luddite then became like reactionary technophobe, or just maybe somebody that's not very good at using machines. Anyways, I thought that was funny. So Caillois maps out all the different things of what is considered play and comes up with 4 different categories of play. Caillois basically reads Huizinga and is like, okay, got the philosophy. Now let's put these in categories. So the first one is Elea, and this is chance. Okay. This is Elea. Okay. Alea is games where the player submits to fate. Outcome is not governed by skill. Any craps, roulette, drawing straws, lotteries, and it relieves responsibility. It causes excitement, like hoping, and also has the capability of obviously crushing defeat, but it sort of dramatizes randomness, and that's why it gets a lot of like destiny and fate sort of things applied to it. This is probably things that we're familiar with if you're watching this channel or ones like it. Next, we have one that this one will probably be very familiar to some of you. The next one is Aegon. No, not Aegon as in dunk and egg, but Aegon by John Harper. Does Blades in the Dark. This is actually the 2nd edition. The first one is better. Thank you again, whoever recommended that to me. And Aegon is competition. Comes from, in Greek, it means contest or struggle. Okay. And this is games where the outcome depends on skill, application of strength or power, mastery, training, fairness, like boxing, soccer, football, chess, Go, Risk, Stratego, courtroom debates, esports. And this establishes, or the purpose of it is to establish hierarchy through merit. Okay, so it creates tension around ability and preparation. Then we have mimicry. And mimicry is simulation, or, everyone say it with me, role play. Mimicry from mimos, which in Greek means actor, or mimesis, mime, right?
It is games of make believe, pretend, role adoption, fiction. All right. And so, probably easy example here would be role playing, but theater, improvisational theater, uh, cosplay, children's pretend playing house, narrative, any narrative or simulation that involves uh, conversation as a mechanic, and it allows for identity exploration, symbolic enactment or reenactment, and freedom, imaginative freedom, unlimited possibility. Okay. Now, the last one I think has a fun name, but it is probably one that as we get older, we like less and less. And that this one is dizziness or vertigo or disorientation. And basically, the I might be wrong here, so classics language people correct me freely. I think this is the word for a whirlpool, like an undertow. I'm not sure, but it's seek play that seeks altered perception. Kids that are just like, I just saw this like a couple days ago, and I was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did used to do this because one of the kids walks up to another one that lives on my block and goes to the other kid, "Hey, do you want to spin around until we get dizzy?" And the kid's like, "Yeah," and they just spin, 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 and then just like collapse. And I was like, if I did that, I think I would need to go to the hospital. I hate being dizzy. Um, but it's a sort of ecstatic disorientation. So spinning in circles, roller coasters, cliff diving, ritual dance, right? Like, and psychedelic or otherwise ecstatic activities. And this is the momentary suspension of bodily control, the thrill of instability. And so you could probably think with that one, as well as each of these, there are versions of this where it's no longer healthy. Russian roulette, um, getting kicked out of your 5-year-old son's baseball game because you fought the umpire, um, being a con artist. And this is one that I wonder if this was a problem. We had, like, my cousins taught me to pass myself out. Anyone else remember that? And I just think of, like, thank goodness I didn't rupture a blood vessel. You'd like deep breathe and then hold your breath, and then you'd have like this. It was a state of anoxia. You'd become cyanotic, and you would have a sudden loss of oxygen to your brain. But let's just say that training I've had since then tells me that it is very possible for very terrible things to happen. But yes, I'm sure in one form or another this is something that happens, and probably in a lot of ways is related to drinking and party culture and stuff in high school and college. So um, games do not only fit into one of these. All right. They can have various parts to them in different distributions. And I think that part of perhaps when I said earlier that Liza and I were at different levels of um, voluntariness in the circle, she might have also had a different opinion, which is, when I think of it this way, it is quite reasonable, that the game was not a game of mimicry, or that the level of mimicry in it was only for the purposes of like pleasant immersion. That if you're going to accuse somebody, you would say, okay, I want to accuse, oh, I don't know, Jeffrey, right? And then you would play that out. And perhaps the reason why people give these sort of absurd defenses is because they're just playing and they're not actually. But I, I definitely had this. And I also was participating in Aegon. Like, I wanted to win, which is yet another thing. Liza could have just been like, this is an excuse for us to be together and to talk to each other, and it's not supposed to be something where we're actually competing. And then when she reacted the way she did, I probably had a bit of this, but there is a part of it that you get good at this when you get sober too, like owning things that you have just been denying. Like you calcify your denial of something, and then you do realize, and you tell it over and over again, and you realize how much that informs who you are as a person. That's so like what you deny, the denial you choose. Now, I can't say that I fully own that, and especially the reaction afterwards. I think there was probably a productive conversation to be had, but we didn't really know each other that well. I did choose her because I sensed that she would not be able to defend herself. She was not able to pretend as well. She was also quiet, and so I purposely I chose her for that reason, and it's one of those situations where it's fair, but it's not good, right? And so I do think that this is a really, really good system, though. And if we think about tabletop role playing, I think we see in a lot of ways why it's such a robust hobby. And then as we think about solo role playing, I think that this is not only does it have some of the best combinations of these, it also has something for everyone. And I would say that at the very least, all of these are included to some degree in tabletop role playing. And I will say, this is going to like sound, I think, like a joke, but let me just reassure you that I am being serious. I think there is some degree of this with over an unhealthy degree of it with like over purchasing things and Kickstarters and stuff like that, is that the reason why it's important to apply some level of self-regulation there is because, at least for myself, let me speak for myself, it does create an altered state where I will see a game and I will have this dopaminergic, serotonergic rush, and I'll be like, that game is it's a doorway. It's a doorway to this other world, and I'm going to immerse myself, and this game is going to be this key that unlocks it. And then I get it, and it's like every time I see it, I see the box, I open it, and then suddenly it's like, okay, it's over. And now I have it. And the having part is the part where it's hard to keep feeling that enthusiasm, because now it actually exists. And I've talked about that before. But it's important to look back again at this idea that Huizinga saw the Middle Ages as this very playful time that was also miserable. And I think there's some wisdom in the fact that, like, it is possible to satisfy several criteria of play, but not to be actually having any fun, or that not all parts of play have fun. And I do want to just revisit that for a second, this thing of the Middle Ages and how Huizinga was like, yeah, this was an extremely playful time. And people were like, playful? What the hell? You kidding me? It was one of the worst times ever. He's like, yes, absolutely, it was. You're right. However, that is where we have to understand, and this is important understanding because it changes the global understanding of the whole model, is that it, for Huizinga, play was not necessarily joy. It wasn't silly, necessarily carefree, happy, fun, frivolous. Huizinga's meaning is not the colloquial one. Late medieval life was playful in the sense that it was theatrical, ceremonial, symbolic, over ritualized, and governed by these formal performances. But like I said earlier, something was missing, and as the superstructure of something grows, but the core does not grow with it, it becomes a shell. And a shell is much easier to collapse, especially when that shell just like keeps expanding. Like I said, his book, the autumn or late autumn of the Middle Ages, he says that this was a defense mechanism, right? So all these rituals and stuff was happening, but culture was exhausted, hyper formalized, nostalgic, cynical, and caught in a ceremonial overgrowth. All right. And so what happened here is he calls them stiff formalism and symbolic exaggeration, ceremonial excess. All right. So this is where these things that are play, for all intents and purposes, become rigid, defensive, and they lose that flexibility that creates a resilience. Like brittle eggshell rather than rubber. And so his whole point is that play during this time was just the sort of ghost of what it was, and that may sound familiar. Like instead of they weren't attached to the reason they were doing these things, and they were no longer generative. They were no longer tied to anything meaningful, and so it was like they just kept repeating the thing over and over, and then they make it more and more elaborate, more ornate. Why do a 1 hour knighting ceremony? Why not 4 hours? Why not 16 hours? Why not have them pray overnight and then have it the whole next day? And so early on in the early medieval period, that play element where rituals created pageantry, chivalry, courtly love, all those symbolic things, those are playful. And play, for Huizinga, creates culture. And so the play has a purpose, right? And yes, animals play, mammals play, but the thing that mammals other than humans do not have is they're not able to create symbols through those play forms that they can then institute into things. They can't say, oh, it's just the natural state of children to play. And it is the closest we can get to like observing man in the state of nature. It's unfortunate though, they're very small and then they don't know anything, but they're acting in the way that they're acting, whatever way it is that they feel compelled to act. And so it shows these natural human desires, inclinations, what hurts humans, what humans aspire to, even if it doesn't make sense. And it manufactures culture. And that pipeline being clear happens in a healthy, especially emergent society. Okay. And so he says in the late period or the autumn of the Middle Ages, it's rigid and it was still built on play, but that play was no longer alive. The pageantry was hollow, the rituals suffocating, the theatrics of it was like compensatory. It was the midlife crisis Porsche. The culture was imploding. All right. It was an exhaustion of a culture that overextended itself. It was built on play forms and it couldn't let it go. It was only recycling. Kind of reminds me, what does it remind me of? Right now, 2025, right? Just look at so much culture right now is just recycled. It is a recycling of 1980s, 1990s nostalgia. We're on an endless treadmill where that was like the last time that anything meaningful was created. And now all we can do is try to dredge it up and put its hat back on and push it out there and say, go get him, Tiger. And the culture is 1980 was 45 years ago. 45 years ago, right? And so this is, it looks like it's fun. It looks like everyone's having fun in those movies and everything like that, but it's not. Okay. Again, that's a whole different discussion. But what does this, why is this so relevant though to not just tabletop role playing? Why is it relevant to solo play? I have a theory. First of all, Salen and Zimmerman, I'm not going to get too far into, but in fact, Salen and Zimmerman, they wrote their thing that I can't remember the title of it. I will. In 2003 or 4. And like I said, they were trying to bring structure, like actual implementable systems design notions from Caillois and Huizinga. They're trying to say, well, okay, how can we actually modernize this and make it count? And so this is a way, way over simplification of it. But I do think we get a lot of it. And for me, the best part is how they define a game. Because I think this puts a lot of it together. They say a game is a system where players engage in artificial conflict. I probably could have written this before I turned on the camera, right? Yeah. Well, it's almost over. It's artificial conflict. It's defined by rules, and it has a quantifiable outcome. Furthermore, they looked at the magic circle idea, and then they looked at the sort of social sciences, political theory stuff that has emerged since then, and they go, you know what? This looks a lot like the social contract. So, in a lot of ways, I'm not as big a fan as them. I think it's important. It's just not as interesting to me. They try to reframe it away from mysticism, which I don't know if it was intended that way in the first place. But what I do like is that they talk about this magic circle as this boundary of meaning. Again, that's like number 7 of Huizinga, that this world has these different meanings in them. It's not literally a circle. It's a frame of agreed upon meanings, but they say it's also permeable, negotiable, and socially constructed. Now, I think that right there is a dividing line that we see in our community right now. Not necessarily that it's negotiable, not necessarily that it's socially constructed, but that it's permeable and that it is open for permeability at any time. I think some people would say, especially as we talk about, like, I don't want to play about this, right? Or X cards, right? These kind of things. People would say, well, this is this social contract that I voluntarily agreed to. And because of that, because we're all under the same agreement, if the state of play changes, I have the right to renegotiate my contract. And then another side would say, well, the state of play hasn't changed. You contracted to a set of, like, not only the rules of play, but that a myriad unforeseen events could take place, and you voluntarily agreed to that as well. This is the unforeseen thing, and just because it does not conform to your tastes or expectations, your choice is to maintain your presence inside the circle. I would love to see this actual conversation be said like this, but
you could probably see how it probably plays out in regular conversation. Um, and and your choice is either like full participation or departure. You can leave. And I think that that is an as I brought up the interesting notion of like fair versus good. Um, that is an interesting ideological debate where it's like if we literally look at it as a contract, um, I can understand a part of that, but then there's also part of me that's like I would enjoy having something in this world that is not a contract. I would just like to enjoy something. And so while it might be right, is or fair, shall we say, legal, um, is this what kind of thing we want to have? Uh, I also think there's a difference between like playing at convention with people you don't know and like playing with friends or even other considerations like locality and stuff like that. This video is definitely not going to be about that. Um, but I think that this is a if anything is taken from this, it's that there is an agreement from both sides that the rules and ergo the game function as a meaning making machine, and that is what Salen and Zimmerman said. They agree with Huizinga. It is a meaning making machine, and that it is a formalized way of using the engine of play to generate culture. But again, I think there's probably some difference of opinion on if this is generating culture, then how much should it allow the culture that already exists to like inform its rules and state of play and baseline? Either way, um, they do talk about the lack or the dissolution of this social contract leads to the same thing as the late medieval period. It leads to this collapse, um, and that we should try to not let it collapse because it does have this transformative power. Okay, that is where I refer to solo play. Transformative power. Now, even though play is done in and of itself, and even though I'm quite insistent on that I do not enjoy, nor do I appreciate the sort of magazine in the Whole Foods checkout line that tells you this thing that you should be doing is also going to help your diabetic A1C, or that talking to laughing with your auntie will lead to reduced cortisol levels over a 6 month time. A new study shows. Yes. Also, can I just have a laugh with old Aunt Peg? Um, does everything have to have some sort of pragmatic wellness, emergent positive boon? Does it have to help me to network? Does it have to help me to increase my revenue? Or again, can this be a thing that is something where none of that matters because we've stepped into a circle and LinkedIn is not in this circle? And LinkedIn should not be in any circle. LinkedIn should be catapulted off the solar system. So when we think about solo play and we think about the taxonomy, I want you, class, to think like which of these is the one that's most difficult. I think that if you are somebody who has a hard time starting solo play, my guess that I want to hazard here is that you're good with this, you're good with this, you take Dramamine for this. This is the one that I think is this right here is public enemy number one when it comes to I just don't know how to do it.
I set everything up. I'm excited about it. I make my character. I read the rules. I check discussion boards. I figure things out. I can't do it. How do I do it? What does it look like? This is something that the mods and I have been talking about in the members Discord. Is like, we want to create more sort of events like on the Discord where people can talk about just games they like. And not only do we want people to make a pitch for those games, like, here's why this game is awesome, but also to talk about what it feels like to play that game. Like, what does it actually look like to solo play um, uh, Ruthless Heavens, Boundless Skies? Did I get the skies and heavens in the right place? You know, what is it? What does it look like? Is it just the scratching of your pencil, the turning of pages? Are you saying things out loud? Are you um, verbalizing excitement and disappointment? How about this? Are you suffering the consequences of loss? When your character dies, are you letting them die? Or are you just going, well, I'll just ignore that? It feels weird to engage in mimicry because, and this is how dumb the human brain is, but I think you'll agree with this. It feels embarrassing because it feels like there's an audience there, even if there's not. And if we get over that idea of that internalized external critic, if we can get to the place where that audience either isn't there or doesn't matter, we have another problem. What's the point of playing if there's no audience, right? Like, there's no one else here. So what am I playing? Why am I playing? All right. Now, I will never get to the point where I will say that, like, solo play is intended to completely replace group play. No way. They're two things. They're both important. I think they're both ideal. They're better suited for certain people and certain situations and certain times and certain games. But there is no competition. And I'm not saying there's no competition, here's the clear winner. I'm saying they are not in competition with each other. And I think that because most everybody enters into solo play with a very strong cognitive model of group role playing as the default baseline, they look at how that looks, right? So you watch these YouTube videos of people just being so clever, so snappy with those voices, and I'm basically best friends with these people, right? And you have these parasocial relationships, and you're able to see what it looks like to play a role-playing game, not necessarily by the rules, by the mechanics, by the usage of tables, the dice roll results, the math. You see what it looks like in the same way, or the same reason you like going to a baseball game, right? Some people like baseball, but other than those 6 people, most of us like baseball games because, for myself, get an ice cold Pepsi. Maybe you get an ice cold something else for yourself. You got the fresh cut grass. You got the uncomfortable seats. You got the hot dog, right? It's a whole experience. And with that experience, it feels right to say, unprovoked and spontaneously, to say, come on, you bum, what are you good for? To a man who is 10, 12 times stronger than you, 55, 60, 85 times more attractive than you. And the reason you feel empowered to yell at this man is because there's a boundary, and he's 80 feet
to, well, or if you're me, 800 feet away from you. Um, and because he didn't catch it, idiot, what's wrong with you? All you're supposed to do is put the microscopic ball into your microscopic mitt after it's hit 400 feet in your direction and flies at 112 miles an hour. How are you not catching it, you bum? What are you good for? Right? That is absurd in another context, but not with the hot dogs and the nachos, and you get the free hat. And yes, you know what? Dippin' Dots is the ice cream of the future, but only when I'm at the big game. All right. We need to convince ourselves that we are playing. And it is only then that we will be able to fully invest in solo role playing. But I think that the question, how do I start? How do I initiate? How do I do it? How do I get into it? The answers usually given are good, but there's one that's before that, which is you can pick up a lot of great tips and tricks of how to do this, how to take notes, how to journal, what do you do about stat sheets, how is your desk laid out? Good. Here's the question that comes before that. Do you believe that you're about to do this? Do you actually believe this is about to happen? Do you believe that you are about to have a good time? Can you picture yourself having a good time? Or have you not thought that far? You just want to feel better. You just want to do something. You have no hobbies. I have no hobbies. My wife told me to get a hobby. My husband said you used to do a lot of things that were fun. I don't do it anymore. Solo role playing is not a hobby it's a hobby you have to run toward. It's not a good refuge if you're running away from like boredom. Maybe if you're on the run from the law, you know, find a nice motel, check through the blinds, and then say, coast is clear. All right, time for me to sit down and play the new solo mode released as part of the asset pack for Blade Runner. Just saw that today. Pretty cool. Solo roleplay is a fascinating combination of so many of these things that we've been talking about. Like, solo play is the self-generation of a story beyond the capabilities that most of us have as writers. Most of us aren't great writers, and so it's hard to come up with these stories. But then suddenly we use these dice and these tables and these different guidelines, and we alchemize them into these great stories, and we want to play. And so we need the magic circle. But the difficult thing is that we have to generate it ourselves. Okay. And in order to do that, that's kind of your homework. Your homework is, especially if you're having trouble with that, and I don't mean to make this into a like this is not supposed to be directed towards those who have trouble with it, but even myself, I have to do certain things to cross the threshold. And when I try to play and I'm not across the threshold, I very quickly am bored. I'm like, forget it. All right. You have to do intentional boundary creation. You have to close the circle. All right. You have to put meaningful constraints. 1, you have to die when your character dies. No cheating. Okay. You have to habituate yourself to that. That is going to raise stakes. It is going to make you concentrate more and try harder. When you don't have consequences and you know that you're not going to give yourself consequences, you are not going to invest the level of strategy that is needed to have fun payoffs. Okay? You need constraints. You need limited constraints. The tools that you bring into it, unless you are literally missing a game-breaking tool, like you don't have enough dice, pick your tools And then that's it for that session. All right. Don't keep running and getting new miniatures and different oracle cards and check online for different tables. You use the one right tool. As the late great Donald Rumsfeld said, you go into battle with the military you have. All right. Let me just looking up it. I have a 20-foot framed picture of D-Rum. You need to put limits on how much the outside world is able to intrude on you and for what reasons. All right. You need to establish for yourself and for other people that you are engaging in meaningful activity that is part of your alone time. I understand that there are reasons to interrupt that. If the baby monitor sounds like baby Thomas is in trouble, go give a woo woo cuckoo to baby Thomas. But make sure you enumerate that as one of the reasons why you are going to leave that space. Otherwise, almost everything seems valid enough to leave the space. One of the reasons that you let so many things intrude on that space is because you're embarrassed. And one of the reasons you're embarrassed is because of this. This is something, especially if you have grew up around certain versions of masculinity, this is something that you're allowed to engage in only at certain times, under certain circumstances, in certain professions. Okay. And so this as well, these two right here, they're associated with games, and games are for unserious people who don't have serious responsibilities. But two things. Number one, if I don't play these games, I'm not very nice. I make everyone miserable when I don't have my outlet to vent my frustrations that I have earned. And I am kinder. I'm more giving. I'm more empathic when I am able to recharge and I'm able to establish space for myself. Number two, you're in the circle, okay? And I think sometimes it's hard to explain this. Any sort of hobby we have that's hard to explain, or hard to explain why it's not like playing Candyland, right? Because a person who doesn't understand might be like, so you go into a room and talk to yourself? And so maybe you'll think about different ways to explain it, or different ways to talk to people about it so that they can understand it, to give you that space for it. But here's what I want you to know. You're in the circle. This space is yours. No one needs to understand it or accept it. Here's a nice mantra, a prayer. Prayers are usually associated with religion, mantra, but in fact, they are just condensed litanies of meaning so that you remind yourself of important values that you have at key times, especially those times where you're not able to think as clearly. You want to memorize and internalize certain lessons that you believe in so that you can recite them when it counts. So go ahead and say, this space is mine. I don't need to explain it. No one needs to understand or accept it. I don't need to explain it. I know I want it, and that is enough. That's enough. And so this doesn't mean that if somebody's like, hey, what are you doing? You're like, shut your mouth. That's what I'm doing. No, but it means that you're not going to worry about it. Like, you can explain it, and if they don't get it, they don't get it. I don't understand a lot of things. Not kidding. My brother told me his job 53 times. He's like, you know, a little plastic thing right by the ignition. All right, so you take that out. And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea what you're talking about. I never will. So the mimicry part, that's tough. But it is also requires you just gotta have some courage, you know. And there's some bigger work here, obviously, to do that might be bigger than this, but that's good if this is what is compelling you to recognize those things. The last thing is you need a ritual. I talk about this a lot. I know that different people at different times from different places have different levels of being able to accept this. When I say that you need a ritual, you might think that I'm saying that you need to put on an alb and a cincture, and you need to find a grasshopper and sacrifice it to the blood god Oshiwasho, and only then can you proceed to play Tales of Argosa. No. You need something that initiates it. If we truly believe that this is transformative, which I know it is, but you might know it too, but you might not believe it. So if you want to believe it, initiate it. Something happens every time you start playing and every time you stop. Doesn't matter what it is. You could break a pencil. Not a Ticonderoga. They're too special. It doesn't matter. You can say, I will play. I will know it's time because I will, every time I walk by, I will roll this. And as soon as it's a 4, that means it's time to play. 13, very unlucky. I'm never to play again. Whatever it is, something meaningful to you, all it has to do is signal to your brain that you have crossed the threshold into the circle. All right. Tired of talking. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye. And especially thank you to these people.